Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amber Masso, and I am the Director of Communications and Alumni Engagement for the Terry Foundation. We're so excited you could join us this afternoon. I'm super excited to have this great panel together so that we can learn a little bit about Dr. Brewer's experience through medical school and then what life looks like for him now. But really quickly, let's just jump into things and I'll let our panel introduce themselves. Abby, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. Hi, my name is Abby Lewis. I attend UT Dallas and I'm currently a junior, so a 2017 scholar, and my major is biochemistry.
Hello, my name is Idara. I am a 2018 traditional scholar. I attend University of Texas at Arlington. I'm a sophomore studying biology and public health.
Hello guys, my name is Declan Conner. I am also a sophomore at the University of Texas at San Antonio. Go Roadrunners. My major is public health with a concentration in epidemiology in pursuit of medical school.
All right, great. And then, of course, our guest this afternoon, Jonathan.
All right. Hi, guys. My name is Jonathan Brewer. I was a 2011 Texas A&M scholar, so gig 'em. I studied biomedical sciences, and after graduation, went to medical school at Texas A&M. Did my clinical years in Dallas at Baylor University Medical Center, and now I am a resident physician in emergency medicine at UT Southwestern Medical Center and Parkland Memorial Hospital.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. So one of the things we've been doing with our streams lately is just like a quick check-in with everyone, considering everything that's going on. So what I would like to know is, where is everyone located right now? How has your situation changed because of social distancing? And then what's one challenge you're currently facing and maybe one positive thing that you've gotten out of everything? So like for example, me, I'm at home, I live alone. So I had to move the operation from the Terry office here, and I am currently working from my dining room table. The biggest change, I think, is also part of my challenge, and that's I am naturally a night owl, and I had worked very hard in the preceding months to have like a really good sleep schedule and get up at the same time every single day, no matter the day of the week. And I was super proud of my progress, and then all of that's just like out the window. But I do think one of the positive things for me has been paying attention to those changes and how they've affected me. Has made it so that I'm paying more attention to myself and making sure that I get what I need at the same time. So just adjusting my routine as things go along. So we can have you guys go in the same order that you introduced yourselves. So Abby, if you want to start things off.
Yeah, so I am still located at UT Dallas at the apartments here. Probably the biggest challenge that I faced with being home all the time is kind of what Amber said with the sleeping. I definitely have stayed up till 5 a.m. some nights and not even realize that it was that late. So that's definitely a challenge. But one good thing that's come out of it is I really like that I have all of this time that I would have been spent walking on campus to do things that I want. So I've been playing Animal Crossing, which is like unheard of for me to play video games during the school year. So I've definitely gotten to kind of enjoy myself and take a step back and look at my work and my personal life and kind of balance it a little better.
So for me, I used to live on campus, right, when I was at UTA, but now I'm living with my family and we live in Fort Worth. So the biggest thing, I guess, would be like it's not quiet anymore. I have four siblings plus my parents. So when everybody is doing their own thing, it gets really loud. So even when I'm trying to study, like I might have to either delegate by sleeping in the day and studying at night when they're asleep, or just having to handle the noise. So for me, like the noise levels has been a big distraction. But something else that's been positive being at home is that we're all together as a family, because it's been a while since everybody's home and nobody's having to go to work or going to school. So I enjoy having the memories of how we're all here. We eat breakfast sometimes, we eat dinner sometimes, and we just hang out together. Something that we haven't had because of like work schedules and school schedules and stuff like that. And do I miss campus? Yes, I miss like the extracurriculars. I miss my friends. I miss like volunteering, like going to club meetings and like eating at a cafeteria. Of course, I miss that, but hopefully like I adjust and hopefully like things get better like in the world. So that's how I've been.
I wanted to say I am back at home back with my family. We had to move out of the dorms, so that's been a little rough just because before COVID-19, I was a very task-oriented person, would wake up early, go to CrossFit, and then study, and then go to my classes, and then study again. Moving back here, you know, everything kind of got spinned around, can't go to the gym anymore, so try to figure out things I can do at home. I find myself sleeping a lot more, staying up later than usual. And I also play video games now too. So that's definitely been a struggle for me trying to stay efficient, especially with all these classes and maintaining everything. And I don't know if it's just me, but it feels like there's more stuff we have to do since we went to an online platform. But besides that, positive things that have happened, I am glad to be back at home with my family. I know moving away was fun, but it made me realize when I got back how much I enjoyed being with my family and being able to spend time with my brother, my dog, and my mom. But yeah, I guess that's...
And then Jonathan, what do things look like for you?
So I think there have been a lot of major changes, both in terms of, you know, personal life and then also in terms of life inside the hospital right now. I think that one of the biggest blessings that we're seeing right now is you're seeing such a camaraderie between all of our colleagues, whether it being physicians, nurses, techs. Everyone is working together in the hospital for our patients. And I think that has been something that has really shown through this time. You can see it in the news. In terms of daily life, you know, being an ER doctor at a county hospital is already busy enough on a daily basis. Parkland is actually the busiest hospital in the United States. I think we averaged last year around 260,000 patients. So it has been interesting to see the volume has actually decreased in the hospital, which has been nice because I think Dallas has done a really good job of doing shelter in place. We established it early and we have flattened the curve in a sense. So we are seeing a lot of people staying home and following the instructions. We are seeing COVID patients now. So it has been a very unique experience. I don't think this is something that has ever been experienced in modern medicine, pandemic of this proportion. But I think that, you know, just in terms of my daily life, I've been very blessed that, you know, being an essential worker, I've still been able to go to work and follow my shift schedule and just kind of come home. I think that has been one of the biggest changes is when you're at home, having to stay home. But I do appreciate everyone for all their hard work and following the shelter in place orders. And I think that is something that is really showing in our distribution in Dallas right now.
So can you walk us through what a typical day pre-COVID-19 might have looked like for you?
Yeah, for sure. So in residency, it all depends on what service you're working on. So most of our year is spent in the emergency department, as you would guess, because that's my specialty. But we also spend time in off-service rotations as well. So we spend time in the surgical ICU, the medical ICU. We spend time doing labor and delivery, just kind of in various services in the hospital, all to help establish our skills as emergency physicians. So generally, a day in the life for me pre-COVID would be, depending on if I'm in the emergency department, my shift schedules are usually around 11 to 12 hours, depending on where I work, because we work at 3 different hospitals. We work at Children's Medical Center. I work at UT Southwestern, also known as Clements. And then I work at my main hospital is Parkland Memorial Hospital. So generally our shifts there, you kind of show up for shift. You'll get a sign out from the off-going resident because in emergency medicine, we do shift work. And then so you'll see the patients that are currently in your pod, which in Parkland, we have a 12-bed pod. And then we have, as uppers, you have the opportunity to run 2 pods, so up to 24 patients. And so you'll get sign out from the overnight resident. And then as they go home, I do a quick round on my patients to see who I have in the pod. Afterwards, if there's any new patients to be seen, we'll go in, I'll get a history from the patient, do my exam, determine what labs or imaging need to be ordered. And then after that, we'll make an appropriate dispo, which means the disposition for the patient. Do they need to go into the hospital? Do they need to go home? Are they going to the operating room? So it just depends purely off of kind of our exam and what we see just based off our labs and imaging. And I'll do that for 12 hours until the overnight resident comes in, and I will sign out my patients to them.
So then how would you say that that typical day routine has changed for you lately?
So I think what's been very interesting, and we made a lot of adaptations in the sense that we've now had to kind of reorganize our triage protocols. So in terms of if someone, now that we have community transmission, it's hard to determine, you know, with just a simple question like, hey, have you traveled outside the country, things like that. So we've now created respiratory pods in our hospitals to kind of triage out our more higher risk patients, patients that we're more suspicious of. So because we do still have a limited amount of tests. And so right now we are trying to determine who is the higher risk of actually having COVID or a high risk patient in general. So right now we're changing our shift schedule in terms of what pods we are working in, and then also what patients we are carrying. And so that has made a fairly large change in our schedule. And then also in terms of our PPE as well, we are trying to conserve PPE as much as possible. So we are trying again to really just focus on, is this patient a high risk or is this patient not a high risk in terms of what we're wearing into the room. So that way we can save our PPE for the truly sick COVID patients. But otherwise, in terms of my day-to-day schedule, I've had to pull a couple extra shifts, but luckily everything has kind of relatively stayed the same in terms of scheduling. We are still doing our off-service rotations. We are still doing our on-service rotations because people are getting sick and they need healthcare workers to be there to take care of them. So luckily I have been able to kind of keep up my shift load and work.
Great. Well, I definitely don't want to be the one asking all the questions. The students have prepared some great questions for you. So I'm going to turn that over to them so that we can get into the things they've been wondering.
So, Jonathan, my question to you will be, what has your journey been like to where you are right now? Like, tell us some of the highlights, some of the major challenges, and like that, and what like experiences / events made you decide to become emergency medicine physician out of all the other specialties that you could have chosen?
For sure. So I never knew I wanted to be a physician when I was growing up. My dream as a child was to be a fighter pilot. That was like my dream. I wanted to fly and then eventually go work for like Southwest Airlines. I thought that'd be the coolest job. And so, not a shout out to Southwest or anything, but when I was a senior in high school, my high school anatomy teacher, she actually came up to me and said, "Hey, Jonathan, you know, you really enjoy anatomy. I think medicine may be something that you would be interested in."
Oh, wow.
So my senior year of high school, I did an EMT course concurrently with my senior year, and I became an EMT basic. And from that moment on, I was sold on medicine, specifically emergency medical services, EMS. I loved the thrill of being able to take care of a patient on the worst day of their life. I think that was just something that was truly humbling, and something that I could always, you know, be there for a patient. And so, you know, going to college, I decided to go to A&M and decided at that point that I was going to try out being pre-med. And so I continued to kind of use my EMT basic license, and just continue to fall in love with medicine. And so, you know, being a pre-med is really difficult. You have to make a lot of sacrifices. There's a lot of Friday nights when, you know, your friends want to go out and you say, "Hey, I've got a test on Monday. I've got to study." There's many times when, you know, it feels like work is just piling up. You've got 3 tests in 3 days and they're all like biology, physics, and OChem. So it can be a very daunting task, and it can seem like the road is very long at times. But, you know, looking back now, I can promise you that it's definitely worth it. You know, one quote, and it sounds kind of cheesy when I say it, but one quote that I was told when I was a pre-med and I've honestly kind of lived by since then, is that, you know, when you're going into healthcare, whether any sort of healthcare, nursing, pharmacy, whatever, you are no longer studying for yourself. You are studying for the benefit of someone else, for your future patients. So you are studying to be their last resort. And I think that was something that really inspired me through those times. I can think of many times in college when, you know, I just kind of asked myself, like, is this really worth it? I've still got like 10 years of school left. But it absolutely is. And so after, you know, I went through my first 2 years at A&M, then became a junior and senior, kind of did my upper level courses, really started to kind of hone in, like, you know, I know that medical school is what I want to go to. Where do I want to go? And then also, you know, will that play a role in what type of physician I want to be? So at that point, when I had just graduated from college, I was in between surgery and emergency medicine, specifically trauma surgery. And so I think that's just kind of the adrenaline junkie in me. You'll notice, especially when you go to medical school, that everyone kind of molds their personality to the specialty that they're in. And so during medical school, I spent my first year, of course, you know, doing book work. Medical school, I think in my personal opinion, I think the hardest part of medical school is the transition in. I think every year it gets better because, you know, your first year is book work, but then second year you get to start kind of learning a lot of the really relevant clinical information. Third year, you're in the hospital. And then fourth year is just an amazing year when you're doing residency interviews and all these other great electives. So my first year, I started really focusing on, you know, what kind of specialty would I like to pursue. And so I did a little bit of shadowing my first and second year, went, scrubbed in the OR a couple times, and then worked a couple shifts in the ER, and just immediately just continued to fall in love with emergency medicine. I think, you know, by the time I was a third year, I'd really decided like EM is where I want to go. And I think the reason for that is, you know, whereas every specialty needs physicians, and I think every specialty has some amazing physicians that are passionate about that field, I specifically loved the initial resuscitation of patients. I say EM is the best 15 minutes of every specialty because you really become, you know, the jack of all trades and a master of resuscitation. So your job is to take a patient who only purely has symptoms or may not even be talking to you. You may have a patient who's completely unconscious, and your job is to figure out what is going on and what is the best route of treatment for that patient. So I think, you know, that was something that inspired me even as a medical student and still inspires me to this day. And you can ask my fiance, I tell her all the time, there's not a single day where I regret walking into the hospital. Because honestly, it sounds, again, kind of cheesy, but I've never worked a day in my life. So, because I love what I do. And I think you'll notice that a lot of medical students in med school, they'll find their fit. And you'll really see that kind of shine bright on their face come match day during your fourth year. So that's kind of how I chose emergency medicine. And, you know, I think one of the biggest challenges in general of going, you know, in this 12-year minimum process is that I think that one of the hardest challenges to tackle is the motivation to continue. And I think just kind of going through that quote and reminding myself why I was doing it is what got me through it. And I think the second most difficult challenge is time management. It is very easy to become overwhelmed. It is very easy to become overwhelmed with the amount of work in both as a pre-med when you're trying to get into medical school, which is the hardest part, by the way, of med school. And also in medical school when you're trying to balance clinical duties with also your book work. And so I think that, you know, if you can overcome both of those challenges, then you're set. And then you will make it.
Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, it did. It really did. So do you mind if I have just a little bit to add on? So you worked and you lived in A&M, and then you now in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
So like as a person of color, like do you think the dynamic change working in those different areas? Or like, do you have any experiences you would like to share, or do you feel like it just stayed like
So I will say medicine is a very unique career. It provides unique challenges and opportunities that really no other career faces. And every career has their own unique opportunities. But specifically in the realm of medicine, I will say medicine is becoming more diverse every single year. And that is a fantastic aspect of it. You're seeing many more minorities. You're seeing many more women stepping up into leadership roles. I will tell you right now, the new class that we matched of residents is predominantly women in emergency medicine.
Oh, wow.
And so it is fantastic to see how medicine is progressing. You know, again, speaking back to the challenges, I have never felt discriminated against by my colleagues. And I can say that definitively that, you know, we are a family, and I've never felt that from any of my physician colleagues. I think that, you know, every single person in medicine is going to feel some semblance of adversity at some point, because especially if you are working in a high stress scenario, you're going to see you're going to see the pure form of humanity. You're going to see people at the worst day of their life. You're going to see people on the best day of their life. And so I have had some instances when, you know, let's put some impure thoughts came out from some patients. But I think that the way that I've been able to overcome all of those is by remembering at the end of the day that I took the Hippocratic Oath and I swore to take care of any patient regardless of what they've said, of what they've done. And I think that's, you know, in the end, they've all led to positive results as a result of that. So, you know, I think moving forward, as long as you remind yourself that the patient comes first more than anything else, then you will overcome. And you will always have a support network in your medical student classmates, in your physician colleagues. And I've never not felt supported by them.
Thank you. Yeah, that answered it perfectly.
Good.
So, so for some of the people who are in Jamp and that are looking to be in Jamp, what advice do you have for them?
So Jamp is an amazing organization, and it provides an incredible opportunity to pre-med students. I think in terms of, you know, advice for people applying for Jamp, when I was going through the Jamp program, we applied as, I think it was second semester of freshman year, and towards the end, and then you interviewed the winter of your sophomore year. I think that during that time, you know, what people are looking for in a Jamp candidate, and whenever they're doing interviews, you interview out of medical school. Whenever they're doing interviews, they want to see that you are just dedicated to the world of medicine. So they just want to know your story. And so I always told students that were applying, I only asked them one question, and I said, what makes you unique? So what makes you you? What is your story, and why do you want to be a physician? So I think that, you know, if you can answer that question, you're ready to apply for Jamp. And Jamp provides so many opportunities through its internships that you do after sophomore year, the Mcat Prep, the internship after junior year, that provides so many valuable lessons. I remember, so I did my first internship at Texas A&M. I did my second internship at Texas Tech El Paso. And they were both incredible experiences. I ended up going to the medical school I did my internship at. And I think that, you know, in terms of going through Jamp, again, you're still a pre-med at that point, which means that you still need to remember, you know, why are you doing this? And even though you answered that question of what makes you unique, you know, why do you want to be a physician? There's still going to be times throughout college when you're going to ask yourself, is this really what I want to do? And reminding yourself that, you know, Jamp believed in me enough to give me this spot. They are investing this time, just like the Terry Foundation. They're invested in me, and reminding yourself, why do I want to be a physician, is going to get you through it. But my overall advice for applying to Jamp is, first off, knowing why do you want to be a physician. Second off, really doing your best freshman year. Because if you think about it, when you're applying to Jamp, that's the only thing they really have to go off of is kind of the tail end of your high school career and the first year of college. So one of the ways that I really learned about Jamp, but then also was able to successfully matriculate into Jamp was by establishing a mentor early on. And I think the Terry Foundation does a really good job of providing everyone the resources to find a mentor. So I think, if you can establish yourself with a mentor that can help guide you early on and say, hey, specifically the intricacies, like this is what you need to be studying right now. This is what I would really aim for in terms of your extracurricular activities. These are the clubs that you would join. That is going to help you more so than anything else, your first year of college, if you're looking to apply into Jamp. And then again, just continuing on, just staying motivated, and then really pushing yourself when it comes time for the internships, the Mcat Prep, and all those different aspects.
And so the one question that most pre-meds always wonder is, what kind of Mcat preparation advice do you have?
So I will say, when I studied for the Mcat, I did so over my winter break, and I did a Mcat course with include like videos and books and things like that. When I studied for the USMLE, which is our medical licensing exam, I did one book and I did a ton of questions and practice tests. And I will say right now, there's two pieces of advice I have. One, and most importantly, figure out how best you learn. If that's practice questions, then do a ton of practice questions. If it's flashcards, do flashcards. And if it's reading a book, read the book. But I would say that doing questions and doing practice tests, in my opinion, are the best ways to study for the exam, because you get to figure out how are they asking these questions. Because the MCAT it's a tricky exam. You're reading passages, then you're answering questions. You get a little fatigued halfway through, and it definitely will test you. But I think by doing practice questions and building that stamina and understanding how are they asking questions, you'll succeed far more than just reading a book. Now, that's my personal opinion. And again, you have to find your own learning style. But if I could go back and change one thing that I did in my Mcat prep, it would be just to do many more questions.
And then just for another follow-up question. So I know you kind of touched on this earlier, but what kind of transition changes have you seen as far as going from college into medical school? And what advice do you have into remedying that?
Okay. Yeah. So again, I think the biggest change from going to college and med school is the time management. I remember my last semester of senior year, I think it was 8 hours of college credit and did research on the side. And it was the most amazing semester of my life. You had time to hang out with friends, enjoy, going to sports events, things like that. And then med school, again, like I said, I think the transition is the hardest part, because when you come in, day one, you're rolling. And so, they always describe med school as drinking out of a fire hose. And, our dean the first day told us, they were like, you just drank out of a garden hose for med school, and now I'm going to feed you out of a fire hose. So it's a lot of information, but I think if you develop those time management skills during college, then you'll be very well prepared to handle medical school. So what I did was I would start studying for a test a couple days before, and I would study a set number of hours each day so that I didn't burn myself out, but that I would really develop those skills to tackle that test. And it would really solidify. So I would the first portion of the next day, I would review the material from the day before. It's kind of a 10,000 foot overview to kind of keep it fresh in my mind. And that works really well when I went to medical school. Because in med school, I studied every single day. And so there was, I would take a half day off each week just to kind of relax and like go out with friends, things like that. And there's still plenty of time to do that. But it's something that you have to develop those good study habits in college to be ready for for medical school. Now, the good part of med school is that most medical schools now are a pass-fail system. Some do an honors pass-fail. So when you get into medical school, they want to keep you. They're not trying to weed you out. So they're doing everything they can. They have tutoring services. They have older medical students who are willing to help the younger ones. They do panels with their former alumni. They do everything they can to help you out. But the biggest key to success in medical school, in my opinion, is developing good study habits and good time management skills. I can speak to, in terms of my time management skills, what I did, and it sounds a little kind of OCD, but it worked for me. Every night before I went to bed, I made a schedule for the next day in 30 minutes to an hour increment. And when I was in medical school and really having to study every single day, it really helped, because I would say, hey, just like you, Declan, like what you were saying about CrossFit, I woke up at 6, I worked out for an hour, I started studying till noon, I took an hour for lunch, just continued throughout my day. And that way I could plan and adjust very easily. Now, it becomes a little tougher when you're like when you start working on call, or you're a resident and, you know, you're actually working like in the hospital, because your schedule changes so much. But especially as a medical student, when you're in your preclinical years, I think that worked amazingly for me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Jonathan, we actually had one of our 2019 Terrys ask a question over the live stream. This is what Pilar, she actually asked a bunch of great questions, and I think you'll address a few of these later, so I'm going to get to the top couple. Yeah. She wants to know, what do you think makes students stand out when they're applying to medical school? And then what do you think are the biggest mistakes that pre-med students make?
That's a great question. So I think what makes people stand out to me the most is, again, your story. What makes you unique? Because if you think about it, each medical school gets thousands of applications each year. So what makes you unique? And that's the question I ask on every interview is, what experiences have you had that are going to make you a better physician? And so I think that's, you know, one of the most important things that you can do as a pre-med is to really mold your portfolio and say, hey, you know, I did just an example, a medical mission trip. And because of that experience, I'm deeply passionate about underserved care. Or I majored in public health. And especially undergoing through the COVID crisis, I saw the importance of the epidemiology of a disease and understanding how populations and how population health makes such a big impact on the spread of a disease. So I think, again, developing your story as to how you came to be where you are, I think is one of the most important aspects of your application. Now, on top of that, things that stand out are, of course, going to be, you know, grades and MCAT scores. I hate to say that, but that's how it is. And then also your extracurriculars, right? So leadership skills, getting involved with the Terry organization on your campus, getting involved with AMSA, Pre-Med Society, or being, you know, fraternity president, something like that. You don't have to be student body president of the University of Texas, but just having some sort of leadership experience that shows that I'm ready to lead a team. Because, you know, being a provider in healthcare, whether it be a psychologist, a physician assistant, a emergency physician, or a surgeon, you're going to be part of a team. And it's really good to establish the fact that I can work in a team and I can lead a team. So I think that, you know, those are things that really stand out. You know, now in terms of common mistakes that occur with pre-meds, I think one mistake that kind of gets overlooked is what I call the cookie cutter pre-med. So the pre-med that kind of doesn't take that advice and just does everything to get those check marks off, and doesn't really establish themselves and give themselves a story. And, you know, they say, oh, I got 100 hours of research, 100 hours of shadowing, yada, yada, yada. But, you know, most students are doing that. Most students are getting those sorts of check marks, but they're developing a story along with it of, you know, why do you like research? Things like that. So that's one thing I would say is really just try and make yourself unique. And now in terms of another mistake that I think pre-meds make is they, you know, if you've failed a test in college, right, you've made a mistake. I think a lot of pre-meds and even medical students, they're very high aspiring individuals already. You know, their aspirations are so high that when they see a bad grade or when they see some sort of defeat in their life, it really affects them. And it just kind of turns into a spiral after that. You know, one of the best applications I ever saw was a student who had almost failed out their first semester of college. And afterwards, they came back, they took a little bit of time off, they came back and they got 4 O's the entire way through because they told themselves that, you know what, I made a mistake, I learned from it, this is how I'm going to change, and they moved forward. And that student blew their interview out of the water just because they were able to say why, and they were able to say how they overcame their adversity. And I think that whether that adversity be something in your personal life, whether that adversity be something in your school life, everyone's had challenges. And so being able to overcome those, I think, are some amazing aspects to your application that you can add. But those are probably some of the biggest mistakes I see pre-meds make. And then also, you know, again, kind of losing sight of why they're doing it. I think that's something that continues on in medical school too, is that you see a lot of burnout. And you see burnout at the pre-med level too. I myself had burnout at certain times. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is letting that burnout overtake you and realizing that, hey, you know, this is too hard. This is not worth it. You know, if there's something that, you know, you find that you're more passionate about, that's different. That's fantastic. And I'm really happy for you. But, you know, just to get burned out, you know, at that point, it's another form of a challenge. And it's something that you can overcome. And that's why you have mentors. That's why you have, you know, your pre-med colleagues, your friends that are going to help push you through this. And, you know, just put this out there. If there's anyone out there that is feeling burned out, I am very happy to speak to them at any point about it. But that's kind of some of the mistakes that I've seen most commonly.
Thanks so much for that. You know, she actually asked one other question that I wanted to make sure we get to before Abby jumps into hers. And it's just, did you feel like there were any upper level classes that really helped you out once you got to medical school?
So I will say there were actually a couple. My major at A&M, biomedical sciences, was kind of the pre-professional major. So it was really filled with pre-vet, pre-med, and then pre-PA students. I will say that some of the upper level classes I took, like anatomy, physiology, those were very useful when I went to medical school because you have to redo it your first semester. Other classes that I think were useful were microbiology. And then a class I took that was, I took 2 classes that were also useful was virology and bacterial diseases. Those as a whole, kind of the upper level courses were very useful when I went in. In medical school, you're going to go in a lot more in depth, and you're also going to learn a lot more clinically relevant information. So even though I took those classes in undergrad, some of the information I learned may not have been more clinically relevant. However, it gave a really good basis for moving into medical school. Now, I will say with the pre-med requirements, you are required to take some upper level courses in science. So I would recommend that you take anything of your choice that is going to be more human based. So anything that really, that sounds like it could probably involve the human body is probably going to be useful come medical school. And whether that even just be a medical terminology class or a advanced, infectious disease class, those are going to be useful for you moving forward into medical school.
Anything non-science based that you've seen?
I think, a a couple things non-science based that I would take would be, actually, I have two things to say about that. Number one, I think it's equally important to keep your sanity as well. We're talking about burnout. Take courses that are just fun for you. You're in college, which is the best time of your life. It is the best time to explore what you enjoy outside of medicine. So medicine is an amazing career, but you have to be able to enjoy things outside of medicine as well. And so, you know, if you love music, minor in music, take music courses, because that's going to make you a better physician. You being well rested outside of medicine is going to make you a better doctor. So I think that is very important, to keep your sanity, do things you enjoy. Now, in terms of non-science classes to help benefit you as a physician, I think taking some humanities courses, some like public health counts as science, but in terms of, I think it's an extra course that if you're a bio major, that can be very useful, taking public health. But then again, taking humanities, honestly learning about culture, learning about the world, because that's something that, again, speaking back to the diversity in medicine, you are seeing, especially in the United States, you are going to see such a diverse population of individuals in the hospital that it really does behoove you, and it's a benefit to understand a little bit about international culture and realize that, you know, the American culture, we're not the only culture on earth. And so I had a patient, that was like a couple months ago, that came in and only spoke Swahili. So, you know, understanding their culture, understanding that, you know, getting an interpreter on the line, those are all parts of your daily life, especially in the emergency department. And so I think that, you know, taking classes that can really help you to understand other cultures and understand the world as a whole, I think can only benefit you, especially in a field like medicine. Because medicine is one of the careers that is universally translatable across every country, right? Just because you move to Slovakia, you still take your skills with you, right? You can still heal people in Slovakia just as much as you heal them in the United States. You know, and it's one of the few careers where your hands are your tools and you take your tools wherever you go. And so I think that is something that one of my biggest passions is global health and underserved care. I've worked with Abby for quite a while in an underserved clinic in Dallas. And, you know, I think that that's just something that is something that's opened my eyes to, again, various cultures. And I think something that really humbles you at the end of the day, because you can provide medicine to anyone.
Right, great, thanks. One of our Terrys, who's currently a med student, Taylor, said that Spanish and histology were also helpful for her.
For sure.
So that's all the questions we have in the feed right now. So Abby, I'll let you jump into yours.
Yeah, so I wanted to go ahead and ask you for advice for medical school interviews, as well as any kind of questions that you thought really were great questions that applicants asked during their interview.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, first and foremost, it's easy to say this, harder to hear. Don't sweat and don't be too nervous. Medical school interviews, all right, it's a conversation, all right? And I think when I was going through my med school interviews, that's one of the best things I heard. And one thing I realized looking back now is that it's not what, you know, TV dramas make it out to be. It's not meant to be malicious. People are just trying to understand who you are. And, you know, that's something that, looking back now, I think that I got overly nervous before my first interview. And my first interview at medical school, we talked about soccer the entire time, because I'm a fanatical soccer fan. And so his son played soccer, and we literally just talked about that for 20 minutes. And so it's a time that all they want to know is, who are you as a person? And I keep reiterating that because it's so true, in that what makes you you. And so I think that being first and foremost is one of the best advice I can give for medical school interviews. Now, the second piece of advice, and kind of going into what students ask questions about, is is the school a right fit for you? So in an interview, we're trying to figure out, are you a right fit for the mission of our school? But you need to be figuring out, are they a good fit for how you learn? Every school has a different curriculum. Some schools do an accelerated curriculum where they do 1 year or a year and a half, as in terms of A&M, of your preclinicals, and then you do extra time in clinicals. I decided that's what I wanted because I wanted to get into the hospital as fast as possible. You know, some people may want a traditional 2 and 2 curriculum. And so I think you are equally interviewing them just as much as they're interviewing you. So asking them questions about their curriculum and, you know, do you see any major changes with the curriculum? What has been the student feedback with the curriculum? I think are amazing questions. And then also just asking them about student life. You're going to have opportunities to talk to medical students, asking them, hey, what do you do on your weekends off? What does a day in the clinic look like for you? I think spending that time, because you have a limited amount of time at the school, touring, interviewing, getting to know the students. Really, it's only a day or two. So getting to know if it's a right fit can be pretty tough. And so I think that's what the bulk of your questions should be about is, you know, is this the right place for me? You know, I think there's not a perfect question that to ask an interviewer. I would say it's good to have a question. I've had interviews when the students had no questions, and whereas it don't really bother me at all, but some interviewers can get a little bothered if the student has no questions. So it is good to have a question, but I also would not try to tailor the same question to every single med school either. So the way I would structure a question, and I think this shows a lot of interest in the school, but also shows that, you know, you really want to see if this is a good fit for you, is to read the website of the school the day before your interview, learn about the curriculum, and then during your interview, ask a specific question about the curriculum or about the student life. So with A&M, I'll give you an example. With one of the questions I asked was, my year was the first year moving to the accelerated curriculum. And so if I remember correctly, this is a little while ago, I asked a specific question about what was the motivation for moving to that curriculum, and what changes do they expect to see in the first year with that curriculum. And there was a ton of changes that occurred with the curriculum being in the first year. So it's good to know that ahead of time before, you know, ranking them number one, which I ended up ranking A&M number one on my list. And then, you know, getting a surprise later on. So I think that's something to ask. I would not ask questions, and this is my personal opinion here. I would not ask questions about what do your students usually get on STEP, or, you know, where do your students usually match? I think that those are good questions, but I think that in terms of in the interview itself, those can come off as a little aggressive. So asking a specific question about the life of the students, the curriculum, I think are much, much safer questions to ask, because you want to end on a good note too.
So Jonathan, Courtney wants to know how you would compare a med school interview to your Terry interview.
So the Terry interview, I think, was, you know, being a 17-year-old in front of a panel of 5 to 6 very well-established, successful people was a little daunting for me. You know, luckily, they really made me feel at home when I was in my Terry interview. You know, one of the first things, I still remember my Terry interview very vividly. And, you know, I walked in, I was a little bit nervous, but then immediately everyone was friendly. They were kind. They were talking. Med school was similar to that. I was nervous. It was only one person, but I was nervous because I was saying, oh my God, this is, you know, a physician. Like, this is my life. This is my career. But again, it was a conversation. It was them just getting to know what makes you you. And on the Terry interviews that I've participated in now, you know, I'm asking the same questions that I'm asking my med school applicants. You know, I see this on your application. Tell me about it. What makes you, you? So I think that was a very big similarity. Now, in terms of the differences, you know, I did not go to a single med school interview where there was a panel. So it was mainly a one-on-one conversation in a small private room. So that was a difference I noticed with the Terry and the medical school interviews. Another difference in terms of just logistics, you know, Terry's foundation being all over the state of Texas, is we had all interviews at neutral sites. Whereas in terms of a medical school, you're going to be interviewing at the medical school, usually right next to where the medical students are. So, you know, you're going to be seeing them studying, you're going to be talking to them, you're going to be, you know, interviewing literally next to your future upperclassmen. So I think that was something that, you know, when I was kind of walking into medical school, it was at first could be a little intimidating. The fact that, you know, I'm inside of a medical school right now doing my interview. But I think that honestly, doing the interview with the Terry Foundation, and then A&M also, we did like interview prep with the Terrys. And I think that really helped come interview time. Just knowing that I'd had a positive interview experience in the past with the Terrys, it really kind of helped to alleviate many of my fears about interviewing. So, and I love talking. So, I mean, it's also like made it a little bit easier. I can just talk to a wall. So I apologize if you hear like howling. I just got a corgi puppy. So it's fitting for always talking, I guess.
So Abby, I'll go ahead and let you jump into your last question, and then I have a couple more from the stream feed as well.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask, how were you able to make time, if you did, for service activities throughout medical school and residency? Just kind of continuing on, you know, what Terry Foundation kind of implements with us on service.
So you said an emphasis on service, like my service activities? Yeah. So, you know, in medical school, the good news is you still have breaks. So my first 3 years, I still had a winter break, a spring break. I had a very short summer break, but you still have one. And so being that I got involved with medical missions when I was an undergraduate, I continued this in medical school, and I would use my breaks to go on medical mission trips. And I think that, you know, again, making sure it's all about time management, making sure that, you know, making sure that you are caught up, making sure that you are okay to go on these service trips, I think is the first and foremost priority. I remember one time I went to Nicaragua with a friend of mine, and we had a test the next week. And so we were on the plane, like doing flashcards with each other. And then like in between, like after clinic each day, we would literally go into our tent and then just quiz each other some more. And so it's one of those things, like, again, just balancing your time well, I think is the key. But, you know, for me, it was fun. For me, it was doing service related activities, you know, even Habitat for Humanity, or working in the clinic that I did in medical school. For me, I enjoyed every second of it. So I always made time for it. And you will make time for the things that are important for you. Medical school is a lot, but it's not your entire life. And this kind of goes back to the burnout, is you have to do the things that make you happy, that give you reason to want to continue forward. And for me, doing service activities was just that. So I would always build it into my schedule and kind of make sure that I got my studying done around it. And it just so happened that we were lucky that we had, you know, break time that I could go pursue those activities. Now, I think, you know, building that schedule every single night made it a little bit easier, because I could always determine when I needed to study and when I was going to have my quote unquote off time. But then there also are times when you won't be able to make those service activities, and you have to be okay with that. You know, even if it's like a family event, there are going to be times when you cannot make it there, because, you know, you're going to have to be studying, and you're learning this as pre-meds right now, in terms of, like, you know, club events or events with friends, things like that. There's going to be times when you're on call or having to work in the hospital, and, you know, and you're working a night shift and you can't make the evening clinic. But at all other times, I would do my absolute best to build it into my schedule and to allow time to do service activities, purely because it was my release. It was one of my releases in terms of combating burnout. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Okay, so do you have any advice for people who are trying to figure out the best ways to search for or reach out to mentors? And I think that's kind of like, it's a two-part question. Do you have advice for them in general? And then do you have advice for them as things stand right now and potentially through the summer even?
For like how to pair with a mentor?
Yeah, how to find a mentor, pair up with a mentor, ask for shadowing opportunities.
Absolutely. So I think first and foremost, everyone here is very lucky to have access to the Terry Connect portal. It is filled with alumni who are willing to take on mentees and would love to speak with someone about their experiences. And otherwise, I think every college campus going through your career advising office is a good start. A lot of them have matched up with physicians in the area that are willing to take on students for shadowing opportunities, whether that be through the Pre-Med Society or AMSA, something like that. They generally have some contacts to go through. Now, in terms of what to look for in a mentor, this is something that's really important. And I think it's very important to have someone who either had similar experiences to you or has interests that align with your own. I think having someone that you can relate to makes a world of difference, because they're going to understand where you're coming from. They're going to understand where you need to go, and they're going to be able to give you really good, solid advice on how to get there based on their own experiences and the people around them. So if you love, even a perfect example, if you love service, find a physician that enjoys doing service. Find a physician that works at an underserved clinic, because they'll tell you how they built in that time for to make time for that while they were in school or while they are a resident, things like that. You know, if you're someone who loves research, find a mentor who's involved in research. And even if you reach out to someone on the Terry Connect portal and say, you know, they aren't involved with that, or they have other interests, chances are they know someone who is involved in that, or who does have passions in that. Medicine is a very small world. Physicians know each other. And that's in residency, you establish thousands of connections. And so reaching out to physicians and finding out kind of what their interests are, what yours are, and then helping with a match is a great way to get involved with a mentor. There are also resources. A lot of medical schools will put out a medical student to pre-med mentor or mentee relationship portal. So I remember at A&M, we had one that was very similar, that we took a select group of mentees each year. So I think doing things like that are good ways to get mentors. And those mentors are generally only a couple years ahead of you, so they understand the time period that you're in, and because they were just there. So that can also make a large difference in terms of your relationship. So those are kind of my avenues for reaching out to a mentor, and then also for shadowing hours. Generally, you know, when you're a pre-med, when you're trying to shadow, I would try to shadow in something that you're interested in. Now, I will say that can be a little more difficult because a lot of hospitals require credentialing. A lot of hospitals, especially if you want to get into something like the OR or the ER, you have to get certain approvals and do HIPAA courses with the hospital. So most hospitals will have a shadowing or volunteer program that you can apply to be a part of. And for example, Parkland has one that we do all year round. And that is an amazing program to try to apply for. And that will give you ample shadowing hours in whatever field you're interested in. So those are kind of avenues to finding mentors. But does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. So this is actually a question for those of you on this panel that are in Jamp or were in Jamp. Omar wants to know, would it be better to apply to the early admission track in the spring or regular admission in the fall? Do y'all have an opinion on that one way or another? Those of y'all that did?
Abby, I'll let you go first.
Okay, yeah, I can go. So for me personally, so I'm currently junior Jamper, so I'm going into my internship too, and then taking the MCAT. But for me, I applied in October. I personally didn't really know about the early admissions, and it worked out fine for me. But an advice with knowing that there's early admissions, it's never a bad idea, in my opinion, to do early admissions. Usually those are going to be the people that they look at, and maybe your office for whoever your Jamp advisor is at your school. They're going to see your application before they see, per se that person applies in October. So it is not a bad idea to apply early if you can. It's just going to get you a better head start on the whole process and getting your grip kind of what the process is going to entail.
So I have to say that, I'm sorry. I'd have to say that I agree with her. When I found out about Jamp, I didn't know that there was an early admission. And by the time I did find out, I was already in the transition to where I would apply traditionally. And I did apply in October as well. And I recently just got in. I found out in March, I believe. So, yeah, definitely there's nothing bad with applying early. If anything, that gives you a chance to kind of get familiar with what it looks like. Because I know when I was applying to Jamp, there's a lot of stuff into it. And it's something you don't want to slack off on. You definitely want to plan it out and try to get the application in early. Because if you're trying to do it last minute, you're going to realize there's a lot of stuff to the application, a lot of essays, a lot of letters of recommendation. So, and the thing with Jamp, it is like an investment into you. So I can tell that, they would have a sophisticated application process, and even with like interviewing and everything, just because they want to make sure they're investing into someone who will go into medical school and be able to uphold the requirements that they have.
I will be completely honest. I don't think they had that when I applied for Jamp. If so, I never knew about it. So I'm going to refer back to Abby and Declan's opinions.
Cool. Okay, so someone in the stream wanted to know, Jonathan, if you have any advice for non-traditional applicants.
Absolutely. I think being non-traditional just gives you that much more of an experience to talk about. I will say some of the most inspiring physicians that I know of were non-traditional. I'll give you a perfect example. One of the members of my class in medical school that I respect so much, she was a nurse practitioner for I think almost 20 years, and then decided to go back and become a physician. And so the average age of my class in medical school when we matriculated into med school was I think 27. So I was young comparatively to the members of my class. And I think, being non-traditional, there's a lot of other factors to take into account. A lot of non-trads have children. A lot of non-trads have, families to take care of. So that can play a little bit of a role when it comes into going into medical school, because you're also having to balance time with many other factors. And during these 4 years, you're taking out loans. You're not really making a large amount of money. If that at all. So those are factors that you have to take into account. But I will say that, in terms of the application process, I love interviewing non-traditional students because they always have an incredible story and generally, have worked in other careers or have had other interests, and that just makes them that much more unique. So even in terms of our residents, you know, when we're interviewing new residents who have had former careers or have even come from another specialty and are redoing residency because they want to be an emergency physician, they always have amazing stories and an amazing pathway to getting there. So I think that it can only help you in the application cycle. Now, there are some unique challenges, again, like I just said, that you're going to have to face in medical school. And I think having a mentor who is also non-traditional and went through that is going to benefit you that much. I was a traditional student, so I can't speak to my own personal experiences with that, but I can say from observing my friends who went through it, they were that much stronger physicians because they knew why they wanted to do it. They knew that the process of going through was a long and difficult process, and they were willing to tackle that. And they just became that much better doctors as a result of it.
It's awesome. Great. Thank you so much for answering that. Somebody wanted to know that since they could hear the corgi, they want to know if they can see the corgi.
If you want, I can go grab him. He's around the house somewhere. I'd have to run off though.
That's okay. Well, if that's okay with you, I mean, I have a couple of remarks to like wrap things up. We're at the end of the hour, so I won't have us go on too long.
Yeah, if you want to make the remarks, I'll go grab him real quick.
Sure. So one really quick thing that I just wanted to point out to everybody about Terry Connect is that you are going to have so much more success, both as somebody who is helping your fellow Terrys, as well as someone who's looking for help, if you're very descriptive about what you have to offer and what you are looking for in your profile. So there's an area for keywords. So if you've said you're willing to be a mentor and you've been through you've been in the Jamp program, or you've taken your Mcat, or you have like specific suggestions, hey puppy, you have specific suggestions, list some of that stuff in your keywords. It helps your fellow scholars find you. And then likewise, in your summary, if you're looking for specific help with something, make sure that you list that so that when you reach out to potential mentors on Terry Connect, they know what you're looking for. Okay, awesome. Well, and we got some corgi exposure too, which I think is an awesome way to end this stream. I don't know about you guys. Thank y'all so much for taking the time. Jonathan, thank you so much for everything, both for today, and then I know just your consistent willingness to help your fellow scholars. Everybody on today's stream is on Terry Connect. And, in addition to those pointers I just gave y'all, the other thing that I just want to say in general is don't be afraid to utilize that resource. That's why it's there. If somebody has said that they're willing to help, they're waiting for you to reach out to them. Just some general reminders. We have another stream coming up on Saturday, the 25th. It's a fun one. It's our Terry talent show, and we have some Terry musicians and an artist that'll be displaying their talents for y'all. So that starts at 7 o'clock. If you have a request or a contribution that you would like to make to future Terry streams, jump on a Terry Connect and join that virtual content ideas group. That's where we're floating all of this stuff around. So again, panel, thank y'all so much. Thank you to everybody that joined us on Facebook Live today. And I hope everybody has a great afternoon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Amber.
Thank you. Y'all take care.
Okay.